Sometimes defending the law means standing in front of a bulldozer and your own mother. Clara Whitmore had built her life inside polished glass. Glass offices, glass conference rooms, glass awards mounted on the walls of a London firm that measured human worth in billable hours. At 34, she was already a senior associate, feared in negotiations, precise in cross-examinations, immaculate in presentation. She could dismantle an argument in under 3 minutes and rebuild it in her client's favor before anyone noticed the shift. People called her a shark. In her world, you were either the predator or the prey, and Clara had long ago forgotten how to be anything else. The morning it happened, the sky over London was the same sterile gray as the boardroom ceiling. Clara stood at the head of the table, laser pointer steady in her hand, outlining the final clauses of a multi-million acquisition. 12 executives watched her. Her managing partner watched her. The client from Singapore watched her through a wall-mounted screen. She was in control. She always was. Halfway through sentence 6, the words dissolved. Not forgotten, disconnected. The numbers on the slide blurred, as if submerged in water. Her pulse climbed sharply, painfully, like something clawing its way up her throat. She tried to continue. As outlined in section, her voice thinned. The room felt smaller. The air felt rationed. She could hear her heartbeat louder than her own speech. Someone asked if she needed water. Someone else shifted uncomfortably. Clara pressed her nails into her palm to anchor herself. The glass walls reflected her image from 4 angles: composed suit, controlled posture, blank expression. Inside, everything fractured. She had not slept properly in weeks. She had not visited anyone without checking her phone every 5 minutes. She had not felt anything except pressure in years. "I'm fine," she said. It came out brittle. She reached for the next slide and missed the clicker entirely. Her hand was shaking. That was the moment she understood she could not force her way through this. The world didn't end with a crash. It ended with the silent fracture of her own resolve. She excused herself with a professionalism so automatic it felt mechanical. In the restroom, she locked herself in a stall and sat down fully dressed, staring at the door as if someone might demand proof she was still competent. The panic ebbed slowly, leaving exhaustion behind. Not dramatic despair, not tears, just emptiness. A hollow echo where Drive used to live. Her phone vibrated. She almost ignored it. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number from the coast. She answered because ignoring things had never been her habit. The voice on the other end was formal, careful. The solicitor from St. Jude informed her that her grandmother had passed peacefully 2 nights ago. The house on the cliff was now hers. There would be paperwork, decisions, arrangements. Clara listened without interruption. Her grandmother had been the only person who never measured her in achievements. As a child, she had spent summers in that weather-beaten house overlooking the Atlantic, chasing gulls, burning toast, laughing without checking the time. She had left at 18 and never truly returned. Law school, training contracts, London, progress, forward only. The solicitor asked when she might come. Clara looked at her reflection in the restroom mirror once she ended the call. Perfect suit, pale face, eyes that looked older than 34. "This weekend," she said to no one. Back in the office, the acquisition resumed under someone else's direction. No one confronted her directly. They were too polished for that. But she felt the shift, microglances, recalculations. Weakness noted. Vulnerability logged. By evening, she had booked a train south. 2 days, she told herself. Sign the sale documents. Meet the estate agent. Return before Monday. Efficient. Contained. Temporary. Her mother called before midnight. Eleanor Whitmore did not waste syllables. "I heard about your grandmother. It's unfortunate." A pause that suggested inconvenience more than grief. "The property has already attracted interest. A development group is prepared to move quickly. I've spoken with them. It would be sensible not to delay." Clara lay on her back, staring at the ceiling of her London flat. "I haven't even seen the house yet." "You know what it is," Eleanor replied. "Sentiment is not strategy. You have an offer in Singapore waiting. This is not the moment to grow nostalgic." Singapore was the apex, the promotion she had chased for 5 years. But as she listened to her mother's voice, the prospect felt less like a reward and more like a final coat of varnish on a life that had already begun to crack. "I'll handle it," Clara said. "See that you do." The call ended cleanly. Saturday morning, the train cut through fields that looked almost unreal after months of concrete. Clara watched hedgerows blur past and felt something unfamiliar, quiet. No notifications, no conference calls, just movement without negotiation. She reviewed the sale file once, then closed it. The documents were straightforward. The development firm intended to purchase not only her grandmother's house, but adjacent parcels of coastal land. Boutique residences, private marina access, profitable. St. Jude appeared gradually, stone cottages, narrow streets, the sea flashing between rooftops. The air smelled of salt and cold wind. Clara stepped onto the platform and felt 10 years collapse into a single breath. She had left this town without looking back. She had not attended festivals, not answered letters, not visited except for one hurried Christmas long ago. A taxi dropped her at the top of the cliff road. The house stood exactly where memory had preserved it, though smaller than she remembered. Weathered blue shutters, whitewashed walls marked by storms. The ocean stretched behind it, restless and immense. She unlocked the door. Dust motes shifted in the afternoon light. The furniture remained, covered but intact. A knitted blanket still draped over the armchair near the fireplace. The scent of wood and sea lingered faintly, as if the house had been holding its breath. Clara walked room to room with controlled steps, cataloging repairs automatically. Roof tiles worn thin, window frames swelling, damp creeping along one wall. Fixable. Sellable. Final. In the kitchen, she found a tin box labeled in her grandmother's handwriting. For Clara. Inside were postcards she had sent from university, carefully kept. Not achievements. Not awards. Just messages about exams and weather and missing the sea. She sat at the old wooden table and allowed herself exactly 1 minute to feel the weight of that. Not grief alone. Regret. The tide was rising when she stepped outside toward the cliff path. The sky had shifted from pale to bruised gray. She told herself she needed air. She did not check the tide schedule. As a child, she had known it instinctively. As an adult, she assumed control extended to nature. The path down to the beach was narrower than memory suggested. Wind pushed against her coat. Waves struck the rocks below with force that sounded almost deliberate. Clara descended carefully, boots slipping once on loose gravel. At the bottom, the shoreline was thinner than she remembered. Water advanced in steady increments. She walked farther than she should have, drawn by the rhythm. The sea did not care about her title or her exhaustion. It moved with indifferent power. A larger wave crashed, spraying cold salt across her face. She stepped back and felt her heel catch in wet sand. Another surge followed, faster than she anticipated. Water rose around her ankles, then calves. The retreating current pulled harder than expected. For a second, just one, she miscalculated. Clara. The voice cut through wind and water. She turned too late. The next wave struck, knocking her sideways. Cold shock flooded her lungs. The undertow dragged, insistent and merciless. A hand seized her arm with uncompromising strength. She was hauled upward, coughing, disoriented. Boots dug into sand behind her, resisting the pull. The grip did not loosen until they were beyond the immediate surge. She collapsed onto wet gravel, lungs burning as the ocean's roar retreated. When the world finally stopped spinning, she looked up. When she looked up, she saw him. Tim Carter stood above her, soaked to the knees, jaw set, eyes darker than she remembered. 10 years had carved definition into his features, steadied his posture. He was broader now, solid in a way that suggested reliability rather than recklessness. "You still ignore the tide," he said evenly. Not accusation. Statement. Clara pushed herself upright, heart still hammering. "I had it under control." "You didn't." The wind snapped between them. Neither looked away first. He offered a hand. She hesitated half a second, then took it. His grip was warm despite the cold water. Familiar. Dangerous. "I didn't expect to see you," he added. "It's temporary," she replied automatically. "I'm just here to settle the estate." A flicker crossed his expression, something unreadable, quickly contained. "Right." Silence stretched, filled by the sea. "You should head back before the path floods," he said. Practical. Distant. Clara nodded. They began walking toward the cliff without touching again. The space between them was heavy with a decade of silence. Unfinished sentences and choices made by a girl she no longer recognized. At the top of the path, he stopped. "If you need help with the house," he said, eyes on the roofline visible above the cliff. It won't sell well in that condition. I can manage. I'm sure you can. Another pause. But storms don't care about competence. He turned before she could answer. Clara watched him walk toward the harbor road, steady and unhurried. The boy she had left had become a man rooted in this place. She stood alone on the cliff as the tide continued to rise below. London felt impossibly far. The glass walls, the boardrooms, the polished certainty, they belonged to another version of her. Here, the wind stripped pretense quickly. 2 days, she reminded herself. Sign. Sell. Leave. Yet as she looked at the house behind her and the ocean beyond it, the certainty that had carried her for years no longer felt solid. It felt fragile, like glass under pressure. The roof began leaking the second night. Not dramatically, not in cinematic collapse, but with a steady, indifferent drip that landed in the hallway outside the spare bedroom. Clara noticed it at 2:17 a.m., wide awake in a house that amplified every unfamiliar sound. She stood beneath the stain spreading across the ceiling and calculated costs automatically. Temporary patch. Structural assessment. Contractor. Time. She had planned 48 hours. The house had other ideas. By morning the wind had shifted inland, carrying fine salt that coated the windows. Clara climbed a small ladder she found in the shed and pressed her palm against the damp plaster. It yielded slightly. Not catastrophic, but urgent. Selling in this state would slash the price or delay the process. Efficiency required repair. There was only one logical option. Tim answered her call on the third ring. His voice was neutral. Yeah, it's Clara. A pause too brief to be accidental. I figured. The roof needs work. Immediately. I was told you run a construction crew. I do. I'll pay market rate. Another pause. That's not the issue. Then what is? He exhaled slowly. I can come by in an hour. He arrived with 2 men from his crew and a clipboard that looked used rather than decorative. Clara stepped aside as they moved through the house assessing damage. Tim spoke in precise terms. Tile displacement, water ingress, underlying timber exposure. No dramatics. No small talk. He did not linger in rooms heavy with shared history. He focused on the roof. It's fixable, he concluded outside, scanning the sky. But we'll need 3 days. Weather holds, maybe 2.5. I don't have 3 days. He met her gaze evenly. The ocean doesn't adjust to your schedule. The irritation that rose in her was automatic. So was the awareness that he was right. Fine. Start today. Work began within the hour. The rhythm of hammers and measured footsteps replaced the hollow silence of the house. Clara sat up at the kitchen table with her laptop, attempting to finalize the sale documents while dust drifted intermittently from the ceiling. She found it harder to concentrate than she expected. The sound above her was grounded, purposeful, different from the sterile hum of London offices. At noon, a small voice interrupted her focus. Are you the lady who almost drowned? Clara looked up. A girl stood in the doorway, curls wind-tangled, eyes bright with unfiltered curiosity. Maya, Tim called from outside. Don't interrogate the client. Clara resisted the urge to defend herself. Your father exaggerates. Dad doesn't exaggerate. The statement carried absolute faith. I'm Maya. I know. The name had traveled through town before Clara arrived. I'm Clara. Maya stepped inside without invitation and surveyed the room as if evaluating Clara's suitability for it. Are you staying? For a few days. Dad said you lived here before, Maya said, her eyes searching Clara's face. Why did you go? I was chasing a different version of myself, Clara replied. Maya considered that answer, unsatisfied but polite enough not to push further. Dad says plans change. From the yard came the sound of a ladder shifting. Tim entered a moment later, wiping his hands. He looked between them, measuring the dynamic instantly. Lunch break, he said to Maya. And you're not interviewing people. She's not people, Maya corrected. She's Clara. Tim's expression flickered despite himself. Right. They ate sandwiches on the back steps overlooking the cliff. Conversation remained practical, weather forecasts, material delivery, how long the scaffolding would stay. Clara kept her tone businesslike. Tim mirrored it. Only Maya moved freely between them, narrating school projects and local gossip with equal importance. Clara watched Tim interact with his daughter. He listened fully. He answered without distraction. When Maya laughed, he looked at her as if nothing else required his attention. It was not performative. It was habitual. "You're quiet," he said to Clara once Maya ran off to collect shells. "I'm working." "You're watching." She did not deny it. "You've built something stable." "I stayed," he replied simply. The words landed heavier than accusation. Work continued into evening. Clara reviewed emails from London, each subject line a reminder of the life waiting. A partner asked if she was prepared to relocate within the quarter. The Singapore office expected confirmation. She drafted a response and did not send it. As dusk settled, Tim inspected the temporary seal over the most damaged section. "Rain tonight won't come through," he said. "We'll reinforce tomorrow." "Thank you." The phrase felt formal between them. He nodded once, then hesitated. "You don't have to sell immediately. It's already in motion. Things in motion can be stopped. In my world, that's called breach of contract." He studied her carefully. "In this world, it's called reconsidering." She held his gaze without flinching. "I didn't come here to reconsider my life." "No," he agreed. "You came to close it." The statement was accurate enough to sting. That night the house felt different. Not restored, not resolved, but active. Tools rested against walls. Footprints marked the floorboards. Signs of present effort replaced museum-like stillness. Clara stood at the fireplace and lit a small fire using the remaining dry wood. The flame caught slowly, then strengthened. A knock sounded at the door. She opened it to find Maya holding a jar. "For the leak," the girl announced solemnly. "In case it tries again." Clara accepted the jar, unexpected warmth cutting through her guarded composure. "I'll keep it ready." Tim appeared behind his daughter. "We're heading home. Dad says the tide's rough tomorrow," Maya added. "You shouldn't go near the water alone." "I'll remember." Maya hugged her impulsively before running down the path. The gesture was swift and uncalculated. Clara stood still, jar in hand, unsure how to respond to affection without agenda. Tim remained a moment longer. "She gets attached quickly," he said quietly. "I'm not planning to stay long." "I know." He did not soften the words. "Just don't make promises you won't keep." "I don't make promises." "That's the problem." He left without waiting for a reply. Inside, Clara placed the jar beneath the faint stain in the ceiling as precaution. The fire crackled steadily. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Eleanor confirming that the development representatives were eager to finalize signatures by early next week. Efficient, clean, profitable. Clara muted the thread. She moved through the house slowly, noticing details she had overlooked on arrival. The carved initials in the stair rail from her teenage rebellion, the faded photograph of her grandmother on the mantel, the window in the upstairs bedroom that framed the horizon perfectly at sunrise. She had built a life defined by upward movement. Promotion, relocation, expansion. Here, everything operated on return. Tides advancing and retreating, storms arriving and passing, people remaining through cycles rather than escaping them. The next morning she woke before dawn to unfamiliar silence. No traffic, no sirens, only distant surf. She stepped outside with a coat wrapped tightly around her and watched the first line of light break across the water. A figure moved along the shoreline below, board tucked under one arm. Tim. He entered the waves with practiced ease, cutting through cold water without hesitation. When he rose on the first swell, balanced and steady, Clara felt something shift inside her that had nothing to do with nostalgia. He had not chased the world. He had chosen a place and built meaning within it. Her phone vibrated again. Singapore required confirmation within 48 hours. Clara watched Tim disappear briefly beneath a breaking wave and re-emerge upright. Control was not the same as stability. Ambition was not the same as purpose. She understood both distinctions intellectually. Feeling them was new. Behind her, the repaired section of roof held firm against the wind. The house was not collapsing. It was waiting. The second day of repairs began with a shift in weather. Low clouds pressed heavily over the coastline, and the air carried the metallic scent that preceded rain. Tim's crew worked with sharper efficiency, reinforcing beams beneath the outer tiles while Clara reviewed the estate documents at the kitchen table. She had arranged the papers into strict order: property deed, inheritance clause, coastal zoning maps, preliminary offer from the development consortium. Structure steadied her. By mid-morning, she noticed a detail she had ignored before. The offer extended beyond her grandmother's house. It included the old pier at the eastern edge of town. The pier was barely functional, used mostly by small fishing boats and as a launch point for surfboards at high tide. Its value lay in location, not condition. The developer intended to replace it with a private docking platform for residents. Access restricted. Use regulated. Clara leaned back slowly. The clause referenced environmental clearance, pending final assessment. Pending. Not granted. Footsteps sounded overhead. Tim descended moments later, removing work gloves. Structural frames solid now. We'll finish exterior sealing before the rain hits. She turned the document toward him. Did you know the pier is part of the purchase? His expression shifted, not surprised but tightened. Yeah. You didn't think that was worth mentioning? You didn't ask. That affects half the harbor. It affects everyone, he corrected evenly. Clara studied him. Why isn't the town fighting it? We are. The simplicity of the answer unsettled her. Through what channels? Petitions. Council meetings. Letters that get acknowledged and filed. That's not strategy. It's what we've got. Rain began lightly against the windows. Tim stepped closer to the table, scanning the contract without touching it. They say they'll modernize the shoreline. Create jobs. And you don't believe them. I believe investors don't fund sentiment. The statement mirrored something her mother might say, stripped of polish. Clara traced the pending clearance clause again. Environmental review hasn't cleared yet. It will, Tim replied. It always does. She didn't respond immediately. In London, she had built a reputation on finding weaknesses in documents others considered airtight. Here, the stakes were different. Not shareholders. Not quarterly projections. People she had known since childhood. A coastline she had once treated as permanent. You're part of this town, Tim continued. Even if you left. I'm here to settle an estate. You're here because you burned out. The accuracy irritated her more than accusation would have. You don't know that. I saw your face in the water the other day. She met his gaze sharply. That was a misstep, not a diagnosis. He held eye contact a second longer than necessary. Fine. Maya burst in from the yard before the tension could escalate. It's raining sideways, she announced triumphantly. Dad, Mrs. Hanley says the council's meeting moved to tonight. Tim's attention shifted instantly. About the development? Maya nodded. Everyone's going. Clara absorbed the information quietly. A public meeting meant open discussion. Open discussion meant procedural exposure. That's not your problem, Tim said without looking at her. It is if my property anchors the deal. He turned then. You're not responsible for corporate ambition. I'm responsible for my signature. Rain intensified, drumming against the roof now reinforced by his crew. The irony did not escape her. Protection built by the very man who stood to lose if she signed. Come tonight, Maya urged Clara. You can sit with us. Tim opened his mouth to object, then reconsidered. It's your choice. Choice. The word lingered. In London, her path had felt predetermined. Work harder, move higher, accept relocation. Here, choice felt heavier because it required visible alignment. I'll attend, Clara said. The council hall was modest, lit by fluorescent panels that flickered intermittently. Folding chairs filled quickly. Conversations overlapped in low currents of frustration and hope. Clara recognized faces older, lined by sea wind rather than stress. Some recognized her and offered polite nods edged with caution. She was both familiar and suspect. Eleanor's name surfaced repeatedly in hushed tones. Clara kept her posture neutral. She had not informed her mother of this meeting. When the development representative took the floor, he spoke with rehearsed optimism. Investment, revitalization, competitive coastal profile. Words designed to reassure. Clara listened not to tone, but to omissions. Environmental impact summarized in 3 sentences. Community consultation framed as completed. During open questions, Tim stood. He did not shout. He did not dramatize. He asked directly about shoreline erosion projections once the pier was removed. He asked about public access guarantees. The representative deflected smoothly. Clara felt impatience rise, not emotional, analytical. The man was avoiding specificity. She raised her hand. The room shifted slightly at the sight of her. Yes? The representative prompted, polite but cautious. On page 14 of your preliminary filing, Clara began evenly. The environmental review is listed as pending supplemental data regarding tidal displacement. Can you clarify whether that data has been submitted? A ripple passed through the audience. The representative hesitated a fraction too long. Our consultants are finalizing. so it has not been approved. It is a formality. In regulatory language, pending is not synonymous with approved. Silence sharpened. Clara continued without raising her voice. Until clearance is granted, any demolition schedule would be premature. Has machinery already been contracted? The representative's composure tightened. Preliminary logistics are standard. Preliminary logistics imply intent, she replied. The exchange lasted less than 3 minutes. It shifted the temperature of the room more effectively than anger could have. Clara sat down without seeking acknowledgement. Tim looked at her as if recalibrating. Not gratitude. Recognition. The meeting concluded without resolution, but the narrative had altered. Doubt had entered the official record. Outside, rain thinned to mist. Townspeople clustered in small groups, discussing next steps. Clara stepped aside near the entrance, absorbing the shift in atmosphere. She had not planned to intervene. It had been reflex. Identify weakness. Expose it. You didn't have to do that, Tim said, approaching. I know. Why did you? She considered the simplest answer. Because it wasn't accurate. He studied her carefully. You're good at that. At what? Cutting through. That's my job. Is it? The question unsettled her more than the confrontation inside. Her job had been acquisition, expansion, execution. Tonight she had used the same skill to slow something down. Maya ran between them, breathless. They're saying the vote might be delayed. Tim rested a hand briefly on his daughter's shoulder. Nothing's certain yet. Clara felt her phone vibrate in her coat pocket. She ignored it. The mist carried the scent of wet wood and sea salt. Around her, people spoke with cautious optimism. Not victory. Possibility. You'll get pushback, Tim said quietly. I'm accustomed to that. This isn't a boardroom. I'm aware. He nodded once. Thank you. The words were simple, unembellished. They carried more weight than praise. Later that night, alone in the house, Clara finally checked her phone. 3 missed calls from Eleanor. 1 email from the Singapore office requesting immediate confirmation. A message from the development firm requesting updated signing timeline. Pressure converged from all directions. She moved to the window overlooking the dark shoreline. The tide was retreating now, exposing wet sand that reflected fragments of moonlight. Cycles. Advance. Withdrawal. Return. Her life in London had been linear, forward without pause. Here, momentum felt negotiable. Clara opened the email draft confirming her relocation to Singapore. She read it once, twice. Then she closed it without sending. The house no longer felt like a temporary obligation. It felt like contested ground. Not just legally. Personally. Eleanor Whitmore arrived without warning on Thursday afternoon. Not by train. By hired car with tinted windows that looked absurd against the narrow coastal road. Clara saw it from the upstairs window while reviewing the revised contract draft. The vehicle stopped precisely in front of the house, as if claiming jurisdiction. Her mother stepped out dressed in tailored cream, heels unsuited for gravel, posture immaculate. Eleanor did not glance at the ocean. She assessed the structure, the scaffolding, the temporary tarps, and measured inefficiency in seconds. Clara met her at the door. You should have told me you were coming. I assumed you were capable of adapting. Eleanor removed her sunglasses. Her gaze moved through the hallway, noting dust and exposed beams. This delay is unnecessary. It's structural, Clara replied evenly. The roof required reinforcement. Then you should have sold as is. At a loss. At speed. They held eye contact. Tim's crew worked along the back slope of the roof. The sound of measured hammering continued, indifferent to the tension below. I've scheduled dinner, Eleanor said. With the development director. 8 o'clock. The harbor room. You scheduled it without asking. I scheduled it because you were drifting. The word landed deliberately. Clara folded her arms. I attended the council meeting. I heard. Eleanor's tone cooled further. You embarrassed potential partners. I asked a procedural question. You created uncertainty. There is uncertainty. Eleanor stepped closer, lowering her voice. You are not here to defend fishermen. You are here to close an estate and accept a promotion that secures your future. My future isn't endangered. It is if you begin confusing sentiment with strategy. Behind them, Maya's laughter carried faintly from the yard. Eleanor's eyes flicked toward the sound. You're involving yourself with locals. I grew up here. You left for a reason. Clara did not answer. Eleanor rarely raised her voice. Control was more effective when delivered quietly. I'll expect you at 8, Eleanor concluded. Dress appropriately. She returned to the car without waiting for confirmation. The harbor room overlooked the marina through wide glass panels. Soft lighting, polished wood, curated wine list. The town's attempt at refinement. Clara arrived precisely at 8, composed in a dark navy dress she had brought for potential signing. Tim was not present. This was not his arena. Eleanor sat beside Martin Hale, regional director for the Development Consortium. He stood as Clara approached, extending a hand with corporate warmth. Ms. Whitmore, I've heard impressive things. I prefer specifics, Clara replied, shaking his hand briefly. Dinner began with practiced civility. Hale described long-term vision, sustainable luxury, increased tourism, infrastructural upgrades. Eleanor guided the conversation smoothly, highlighting Clara's role in major acquisitions. Clara listened without interruption, analyzing phrasing rather than promises. Midway through the main course, Hale leaned forward. We're prepared to expedite demolition once environmental clearance is formally recorded. Equipment is on standby. Standby where? Clara asked. Regional depot. Under contract? Preliminary contract. Eleanor interjected lightly. Clara enjoys details. I rely on them, Clara corrected. Hale smiled thinly. Naturally. Eleanor shifted the topic. Clara will be relocating to Singapore within the quarter. This transaction simplifies her departure. The statement hung between them. Clara did not immediately respond. Hale's expression sharpened with interest. Singapore is a significant step, he said. Congratulations. Clara set her glass down carefully. I haven't confirmed. Eleanor's gaze hardened almost imperceptibly. It's a formality. No, Clara replied evenly. It isn't. Silence tightened at the table. Hale cleared his throat. From our perspective, clarity benefits all parties. Clarity depends on compliance, Clara answered. Your environmental clearance remains pending supplemental tidal displacement data. Eleanor's jaw set. We discussed this. Yes, Clara said. At the council meeting. Hale's tone cooled. Our consultants are confident. Confidence is not authorization. Eleanor placed her fork down with precision. Clara. Clara turned to her. If demolition proceeds prematurely, liability exposure expands. That's not sentiment. That's risk assessment. Hale leaned back slightly. Are you threatening to withdraw? I'm stating that signatures require alignment. The room seemed smaller despite its space. Other diners spoke softly at distant tables, unaware of the fracture forming at this one. She stood before Eleanor could respond. The movement was controlled, deliberate, not dramatic. Final for the evening. Outside, night air carried sharper cold. Clara exhaled slowly, steadying her pulse. She had not planned confrontation tonight. It had emerged because deflection was no longer sustainable. Footsteps approached from the shadows near the marina railing. Tim, you weren't subtle, he observed. You were listening. Half the room was. She crossed her arms against the wind. She bought me a ticket. I figured. You knew? I know how she operates. Clara looked out over the dark water. I built my life following that model. You built it well, he said. Did I? He didn't answer immediately. You look tired. That's not a legal argument. It's not meant to be. Silence stretched, but not uncomfortably. The marina lights reflected in fractured lines across the surface of the sea. She thinks staying here is regression, Clara said quietly. And you? I think leaving without deciding would be. Tim studied her profile. If you stay, it won't be simple. I don't require simple. He nodded once. Then decide for yourself. I am. Her phone vibrated again. Eleanor's name illuminated the screen. Clara silenced it without reading the message. The choice no longer felt abstract. It had weight, consequence, visibility. For the first time in years, the next step in her life was not pre-structured by expectation. It required declaration. Behind them, the tide began to rise again, steady and inevitable. The machinery arrived at dawn. Not demolition cranes yet, but transport trucks carrying steel fencing and survey markers. Clara saw them from the cliff path as she returned from a sleepless walk along the shoreline. The sight triggered immediate calculation. If equipment was being staged before environmental clearance, the company was gambling on inevitability. By the time she reached the harbor, a crowd had already formed near the pier. Fishermen stood with arms crossed. Shop owners hovered at the edges. Maya clutched Tim's hand, eyes wide but unafraid. Tim's posture was rigid, controlled. He wasn't shouting. He was waiting. A man in a reflective jacket began instructing workers to unload fencing. Clara moved through the crowd without hesitation. "Under whose authorization?" she asked clearly. The man glanced at her dismissively. "Ma'am, please step back. Provide the permit reference number." He hesitated. "We're operating under projected approval. Projected approval does not authorize physical obstruction of public access." Her voice carried, not loud but precise. "Environmental clearance remains pending. Any alteration to the shoreline prior to formal consent constitutes violation." Murmurs rippled outward. Phones were raised. Tim stepped closer but did not intervene. He knew this terrain belonged to her. The site's supervisor frowned. "Who are you?" "Property holder of the adjacent parcel and legal counsel." She did not elaborate. "Cease unloading until documentation is verified." A tense pause followed. The workers slowed. The supervisor made a call, turning away from the crowd. Clara held position. Within 20 minutes, the trucks remained idle. No fencing touched the ground. It was not victory. It was delay. But delay mattered. Eleanor's car appeared again before noon. She stepped out with controlled fury sharpened into composure. "What are you doing?" she asked quietly once they stood apart from the crowd. "Preventing liability. You are obstructing contractual execution. There is no lawful execution without clearance. You're humiliating yourself." "I'm protecting myself." Eleanor's eyes hardened. "This town will not reward your sacrifice. They will forget once you leave." "I'm not leaving." The statement surprised even Clara with its steadiness. Eleanor studied her as if reassessing a contract gone rogue. "You think this is rebellion. It's regression. I think it's alignment." "With what?" "With my own decision." For a fraction of a second, Eleanor's control slipped, revealing something beneath. Fear not of loss, but of irrelevance. "You are throwing away a global future for a collapsing coastline. I'm choosing where to stand." Behind them, Tim spoke calmly with council members, ensuring the workers remained paused. He did not look at Clara. He didn't need to. Eleanor stepped closer. "You will regret this." "Perhaps," Clara replied, "but it will be my regret." Silence passed between them. Eleanor straightened, recalibrating. "You are no longer acting in the firm's interest. I'm acting in mine." "And what is that?" Clara glanced at the pier, at Maya gripping a railing too large for her hands, at townspeople waiting without spectacle. "To stop pretending I don't care." Eleanor turned without further argument. Retreat, not concession. The car door closed with final precision. The trucks withdrew an hour later after receiving instruction from corporate headquarters to suspend physical staging pending review. The crowd did not cheer. They exhaled. Tim approached once the tension thinned. "You escalated." "They escalated first." "You just made this personal." "It already was." He studied her carefully. "You understand this could get ugly." "I negotiate uglier." "That's not the same." She met his gaze steadily. "No, it's not." For the first time since she arrived, the distance between them shortened without uncertainty. Not romance. Recognition. That evening, Clara returned to the house and opened her laptop. Instead of drafting corporate confirmations, she began compiling a formal injunction request based on procedural irregularity and premature operational staging. She cited environmental statutes, local zoning codes, and precedent cases involving coastal erosion mismanagement. Her focus sharpened with purpose she had not felt in months. This was not burnout avoidance. It was application. Skill redirected rather than abandoned. Near midnight, a message arrived from the Singapore office. "Final confirmation required by 9 a.m. tomorrow." Clara typed a response. Clear. Concise. Declination of relocation offer. Appreciation for opportunity. No apology. She read it once, then pressed send. The act did not feel reckless. It felt measured. She stepped outside afterward. The ocean was dark but steady, wind calmer than earlier. Tim stood at the edge of the cliff, hands in his jacket pockets. He must have seen the light in her kitchen. "It's done," she said. "What is?" "I'm not going to Singapore." He didn't smile. He nodded once, absorbing the weight of it. "That changes things." "Yes. For you. For all of us." He exhaled slowly. "I didn't want you to stay out of guilt." "I'm not." "Or defiance." "I'm not." "Then why?" She looked at the water, then back at him. "Because I'm better when I choose the fight." The answer settled between them without theatrics. Maya's voice called from below, asking if the fencing was really gone. Tim turned to respond. Before he stepped away, he looked at Clara once more. "Storm's coming tomorrow," he said. "Big one. I've read the forecast." He nodded. "Good." The next day, the storm arrived as predicted. As the wind howled, Clara stood at the window watching the pier hold, battered but intact. Destruction had been imminent not because of nature, but because of ambition. When the waves began to subside, Tim entered without invitation. "Pier's still standing," he said. "So are we." He stepped closer, rain still clinging to his jacket. "You chose this." "Yes." Slowly, deliberately, he closed the distance between them. The kiss was not impulsive, it was an acknowledgement. And together, they walked toward the shoreline to face the aftermath. By the time the first shoots of spring appeared, the town's rhythm had shifted from survival to restoration. Clara converted the front room into an office, Whitmore Legal, hung by the gate in Maya's uneven lettering. One evening, Tim joined her on the porch of the house she had reclaimed. "You're not looking for the exit anymore," he observed. Clara leaned against the doorframe, watching Maya in the yard. "I found a better fight here." He didn't offer a promise of ease, only a hand to hold as the sun dipped below the Atlantic. The glass cage was gone. The coastline did not imprison her, it grounded her. She had finally chosen where to stand.